Welcome, everyone. Today, the Women's Canadian Club of Hamilton on Wednesday, April 19, 2023, is gathered to host another wonderful educational presentation. We recognize and acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon, Wampong Agreement. Might we not only learn about the Indigenous people of Canada, but from them? The Canadians Women Club of Hamilton, we've been in exception since my page just popped for a moment, so I do apologize. I just having some technical difficulties, my apologies. Our purpose is to foster throughout the greater Hamilton area an interest in all matters of public concern in order to strengthen our Canadian unity and identity, to encourage the education and promotion of Canadian heritage and history, to foster an appreciation and awareness of Canadian culture and traditions to new Canadians. Cannabis has become one of the world's leading industries, but what's the big deal? Today, we have Ms. Reena Rampersad from the Organja Cannabis Society speaking with us about the past, present, and future of cannabis, including the healing benefits it provides to us. As a former social worker for the city of Detroit, Reena has advocated for social justice most of her life, with much of her work focused on the inequities, in the cannabis industry and society on whole. Pairing advocacy and her culinary skills, trust me, I know this is a sidebar, but when you have tasted her food, Continuing, Reena created High Society Supper Club, a cannabis education and events company. She's the recipient of Now Magazine's Reader's Choice Award for Best Edibles Maker and has been featured on various media outlets, including CBC, Zoom Media's One Network, the Globe and Mail, the New York Times, the Canada Press, Flair, and many more to mention. At this time, I introduce and give the floor to Ms. Reena, who will give us a little bit more details about herself, and she will begin her presentation. Welcome, and thank you for being here today. I will ask that if you could mute your microphones, please.
Oh, sorry, Reena, you have to unmute yourself. I've muted everybody here.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. Thank you.
Hopefully everyone can hear me now. There we go. Once again, I'm just going to repeat that really quickly. Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here today. It's such a special week too. It's 420, so it's a big week for people in the cannabis industry or cannabis connoisseurs or ganja lovers, however you want to say it. Thank you so much for Women's Canadian Club for taking the time today to join me. I know you could be anywhere doing anything, but you're here right now spending your time with me, and I truly appreciate and I definitely value that. So thank you so much. As Louise expressed, I belong to quite a few organizations, actually. I am currently the founder and operator of the High Society Supper Club. High Society Supper Club is a cannabis education event and catering company that operates out of Hamilton, my intention is to normalize the use of cannabis. I am also on the board of the Organja Society, as Louise had mentioned. The Organja Society is responsible for representing the sovereign and sacred and sacramental rights behind cannabis and the cannabis plant, as well as I was also a founding member of the Campaign for Cannabis Amnesty, which asked the government to expunge cannabis convictions once legalization came into play. So, I've been doing things for a little while. As April 20th comes near, like I said, it just seems really appropriate that we would talk about this here today. In North America, 420 is a big celebration. And, certainly a lot of people wonder why and what and all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about that today. Why cannabis? Why does it matter? And why should you care? All right, so we'll get into that, but I think that a great way to start is always to, reel people in with what your personal story is. When we talk about our story, a lot of times we can relate to each other, and, hopefully maybe there's something you can pull from this, but, essentially we all have a cannabis story. We all have a cannabis story, whether you realize it or not, whether you've embarked on it or not yet. I believe that we all do have a cannabis story, even if it's indirectly in some way, shape, or form. And so here's mine. Long story short, I grew up around ganja my whole life. My grandmother smoked it. My father smoked it. It was very normal for us. I knew that there was something a little different, though, because I saw my family dealing with a lot of different types of attitudes and reactions based on what their choices were. So one evening in 1978, my father was sitting on my uncle's porch and he was enjoying a spliff, over a peaceful conversation over religion. My uncle was a devout Hindu and they were discussing religion, but the smell alarmed the neighbors, enough so that they called the police on him. And when the police arrived, the police asked him to extinguish it because it was bothering the neighbors. My father politely refused and said, "We're on private property. We're not loud. We're not disturbing anyone. We're not harming anyone. Please just let me be." And so the officer continued to physically try to restrain, and he actually assaulted my father and took away his joint. But, what can I say? My dad was a strong man from the Caribbean. He wasn't used to maybe that kind of oppression, or it was just so strange to him. He fought back and, defended himself, which resulted in the SWAT team showing up in a whole other set of circumstances. Long story short, my father ended up in jail. We all had to watch this. I was only 4 years old watching my father being beaten up by the police and taken away for something that I couldn't even understand. As far as I knew, he was sitting there smoking a cigarette. I didn't know the difference. I knew he had done nothing, but next thing you know, he was in jail. The great part of the story is that he did fight it, and eventually justice, ruled on his side, and he did win. And the pardon, he was given a pardon, all kinds of things. He shouldn't have had an offense in the first place, but that was the first, experience. So moving forward, let's talk about, just talking quickly about my family, healthcare, cannabis, all of that. My mother, very personal here. My mother had a problem with alcoholism. Alcoholism affects a lot of women, and it's actually the number one disease. We don't talk about it because it's so encouraged and supported in our culture. But in my culture, some people will use cannabis as a harm reduction tool, or, to help wean people off of alcohol or harder drugs. So when my mother was in the hospital, we brought this up to her medical staff and let them know, there's something that we know about that does tend to have a lot of success with people. So when we brought it up, the reaction was, again, hands far out, looking at us at the end of their noses, and we were actually threatened. They actually told us that they would call the authorities on us if we decided to try and incorporate that method of treatment with my mother. So obviously we dropped it. And, my mother passed away shortly after at the tender age of 45 years old. Do I think that maybe there might have been a difference? We don't know for sure, but knowing what I know now, I definitely think it could have made a difference in her life. Fast forward, my father developed diabetes, had the need for much medical care. And when he went to get his medical license, his doctor denied him. A lot of doctors are not aware about cannabis. It's not forced. It's not part of the, medical program, if you will, even though we all have endocannabinoid system in our body. Long story short, he lost confidence in his doctor and then developed a condition that was not recognized or diagnosed, developed a condition that was not determined, or we didn't detect it. Sorry, is what I'm saying. We didn't know that he had this, and he ended up passing away at age 57, which is a very young age too. And do I think that cannabis prohibition or better attitudes might have helped this as well? I definitely think so. If he had more confidence in his doctor, if his doctor seemed like he was supportive of the kind of care that he wanted to administer, then he would have been there, and I think he would have found out. Another story for you. My youngest brother, from a very young age, he racked up a long list of cannabis offenses. As many racialized youth tend to partake in cannabis use, it makes them much more susceptible and vulnerable to over-policing and overexposure to the criminal system when they don't need to be. My brother left us at the tender age of 25, and to this day, I am convinced that the over-prohibitive regulations and racist regulations around cannabis are not just discriminatory, but also deadly in some cases. We've lost a lot of people to the war on drugs and prohibition. So, thank goodness we're finally on the side of legalization. But I do this because lost lives matter and our health matters and people's opinions do matter. So this is why we're talking. My personal relationship with cannabis, okay, very quickly, as I mentioned, I grew up around it. But it wasn't until I returned to it as an adult that I really recognized the gift that cannabis truly is and what it brought to my life. In my 20s, I was a social worker in the city of Detroit. I worked in some of the toughest neighborhoods in North America. And, the war on drugs and testing is very, very real, invasive and very real, drug testing in the States. So they would test my urine, without notice often. And it became too stressful. So I stopped smoking because of that. But I have to say, as a social worker, I couldn't not notice that cannabis was never a problem. It was almost never mentioned in the files. If it was in the files, it was at the end of a long list of barbiturates and other things. The number one thing that brought families into care was alcohol. And alcohol was legal and allowed. So, it really gave me a different perspective on things for sure. Now, fast forwarding to myself, almost age 30, going through a divorce. Also, I just lost my father. I ended up stumbling upon his stash in his freezer. I did give some to his friends, but I decided to roll one up in his honor and have a smoke. And my goodness, was it ever life-changing? I can't even tell you. First of all of the mental stress that I was feeling, I don't want to say it disappeared because it certainly didn't disappear. It just became less intense. It's almost as if I was stepping outside of my body as a third party and looking at my life and its circumstances from a non-biased, non-judgmental view, where I was kind of able to come up with ideas and solutions and, maybe it's not that bad. And, this happened because of this. And I was able to rationalize. All of a sudden, my mental stress, had really come down. Also, I have endometriosis. I've been living with endometriosis my whole life. Endometriosis is most highly experienced amongst Black women and women of color, as well as fibroids. I used to take very heavy medication, and I can't even tell you that first smoke I had literally made the pain disappear for me almost instantaneous. Now, I thought I was imagining things, so I had to test this out, and I did. I did a few experiments where, I did a month with some cannabis and a month with no cannabis, and I can't even tell you, it was so debilitating without it. I will never do that again. So I started doing research, and I found that I wasn't the only one. And there was a lot of evidence that actually really backed this up. It wasn't just a wives' tale. It really did improve my life. So, why should you care? Why should you care? Why should you care? Because cannabis has been around for a very long time. And it's actually been a part of our lives for a very long time as well. Prohibition did an excellent job of erasing that from our memories and erasing it from the pharmacopoeia, but we need to reintroduce this into our health regimens. and our routines. For those of us, who are interested and, want to move forward, this is definitely something I would say you owe it to yourself to explore. So let's give you a quick perspective of how long cannabis has been around. Let's do a really quick, I'm not going to say history, a quick herstory. Since cannabis is a female plant, let's celebrate its femininity. So a quick herstory of the cannabis plant. So, a lot of documents are saying that cannabis use was recognized as early as 8,000 years ago. We're finding evidence, but we're actually finding new evidence that's saying that it was around and in use as early as 25,000 years ago. So this is a very long time. 25,000 years cannabis use has been in existence. And in the last 100 years, we somehow seem to wipe that from our memory. The earliest records of use are in China. Pen Cao Qing, around 2737 BC, where hemp was used for many things and recognized for its ability to treat things like gout, malaria, and rheumatism. Moving forward, we know that it's very much present in the Hindu culture and Hindu rituals. The sadhus smoke it. And if you know who the sadhus are, they look like the Rastafarians. They have dreadlocks and everything in India. And the pundits tend to enjoy it as well. Hindus, started showing up with cannabis around 2000 BC. And it was described by them as a source of happiness and a joy giver, a bringer of freedom even, that was compassionately given to humans by the gods to relieve them from anxiety and help them achieve delight, as well as fearlessness, relief from anxiety to help them achieve delight, and so much more. Medically, of course, it's been used to treat numerous things, from epilepsy to rabies, anxiety, asthma, and even bacterial infections such as bronchitis. Noteworthy also, the Egyptians. We have ancient hieroglyphics that show depictions of cannabis use and contraptions that resemble bongs and vaporizers and other kinds of things, as well as the actual plant itself and its unmistakably recognizable pointy leaves. So it's been around. That's going back to about 1500 BC, of course, and then moving on the Greeks and Romans, there is evidence that they were using it somewhere around 400 BC, and then eventually it made it up to us, right? And it's traveled all around the world. So it was a part of our pharmacopoeia until the early 1900s, when prohibition became very successful and was, put into place by a gentleman by the name of Harry Anslinger, who actually was a very racist individual. He convinced the government that cannabis made white ladies want to be with Black men. And this is exactly how he said it. And it's horrid and it's terrible that this was even documented, but it's documented everywhere. Don't take my word for it. You can Google it. Harry Anslinger, very racist remarks, is what started prohibition, which is incredible. So, it goes without saying that we are long overdue for reestablishing our relationship with cannabis, for sure. Fast forward to today. As Louise mentioned in the introduction, today cannabis is the number one cash crop globally. Number one cash crop. That's huge. And, one of the most respected avenues of agriculture today, for sure, and probably will be forever now that this has been created. It was also the number one traded stock for a long time on the TSX and CSE here in Canada for a great reason. And the US government, I don't know if you're aware, the US government actually holds the only patent available for cannabis. Not for nothing, for a reason, obviously. And the fact that so many celebrities have jumped on board has got to say something. Celebrities including Whoopi Goldberg, Erykah Badu, Jay-Z, Martha Stewart, Willie Nelson, Jim Belushi, Mike Tyson, Gwyneth Paltrow, John Legend, Drake, Justin Bieber, and the list goes on and on and on. And then there's the star-studded lineup of athletes who have also joined on board, singing its healing praises of CBD and THC also. So it's definitely getting a lot of recognition that it hasn't in the past. And of course, there's plenty of potential financial benefit if you don't want to partake in it, in certain ways, maybe for yourself. Whether you decide to look into owning a dispensary, a grow facility, but you don't even, or be employed by one of these. You don't even have to be in the actual industry itself, because there are so many ancillary services that are needed and required for the industry to run efficiently, that you could literally stay in whatever profession you are and then tailor it to the cannabis industry. Contractors have all talked about their workloads picking up. People are very busy: electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, delivery people, stagers, designers, marketing and advertising individuals, anyone who's involved with strategic business planning, financing, you name it. Like, all of these industries have benefited from the cannabis industry. So don't think that you have to specifically be dealing with ganja to benefit. But what I'd really like to leave you with today is the amazing and surely nothing short of miraculous ability that the plant has to help and heal in so many situations and circumstances. Full disclosure, obviously, I am not a medical doctor. I'm not an MD. I'm not a medical professional, and I can't officially give you any professional advice. But what I can do is tell you about what some of the studies have said, as well as people's anecdotal claims, and starting with myself. Let me just give you a quick Cannabis 101 here. So in case you weren't aware, we were all and are all born with an endocannabinoid system in our body. How we were not taught that in school, I don't know. We have an endocrine system, we have our skeletal system, we have our pituitary system, we have so many other systems that we learn about. We did not learn about the endocrine system. It's the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is a very important system in our body because it helps us to regulate and modulate a lot of things. It's responsible for homeostasis. It's responsible for brain function, immune function. It also plays a role in reproductive health and your hormones. So the endocannabinoid system is, wow, one of the most undervalued. So we definitely need to, re-explore this, if you will, and push Health Canada to make this a part of our doctors' pharmacopoeia and learning, because it's not included. Some doctors know it, some don't. So you literally have to look for cannabis friendly doctors because they have not forced it. Why? Because in my opinion, the government's making money on the retail side, so they're not so concerned about the medical side. They've kind of dropped it. It was in development, and then legalization came, and they dropped the medical side and really stopped developing it. But we really need to push for that, because medical cannabis is a real thing, and people who need their medicine should have that covered, and it's not going to get recognized until we validate it as such. And there's enough evidence, enough studies, enough money that's been put into it to show that this is real and valid and should be part of mainstream use. So as I mentioned, we have an endocannabinoid system in our body. When we utilize cannabis, our bodies break apart that cannabis, and different components go to different areas to help out with different things. So cannabis contains many different components, as I said, including THC, which is responsible for the high, among other scientifically proven pain-fighting compounds, including CBD, which I'm sure you've heard about. Everyone's talking about CBD. CBD is the buzz, the health buzz. CBN, CBG, and many others. These can contribute to pain relief and or healing, and has also been reportedly used to treat ailments including, but not limited to, fibromyalgia, asthma, endometriosis, nausea, inflammation, cataracts, sleeplessness, depression, anxiety, and so much more. I have many friends who only recently discovered the benefits of cannabis during menopause and their senior years, and the quality of their lives have improved tremendously. So it's never too late for you to begin if it's something that you're interested in, and why not explore it? Here's a fun fact. The greatest growing group of new cannabis users are over 60. It's our aging population who's recognizing the benefits, who don't necessarily want to run to big pharma because they are acknowledging that sometimes it makes you feel worse. So yeah, our over 60 people, good for you. That's great. And you know, let's just say this, not everyone can smoke, right? And we know that, but pretty much everyone can benefit in some way, shape, or form, whether you use it topically, you know, or maybe you ingest a smaller amount, or you just ingest one component of the actual plant itself. You know, there should be benefit for you. And with what we've just experienced, my goodness, over the last few years with COVID, and all of the new health concerns and you know, things that have arisen, people are definitely making a mad dash and an exodus, if you will, back to plant medicine and Mother Nature for good reason. You know, it's definitely something that you should probably explore, you know, if you find that other things are not working for you. Not only is it less expensive, but it also empowers you by forcing you to learn more about you and your body and how it works and how it interacts with other things and components, right? This has the ability to help us shift the paradigm in many, many ways. And as a woman, as women, Women's Canadian Club, and since cannabis is a female plant, perhaps you already have an established relationship. So, what's your ailment? Do you have lack of sleep? Are you experiencing pain? Do you have mental burdens? I think we all do. Perhaps another option for you is ganja. But you're never going to know unless you do your research. So, my suggestion is find a friend, find a naturopath, or a cannabis friendly doctor to assist you if you need some guidance. Talk to your friends, consult a few blogs. There's so much online now about cannabis and people's experience. You know, you can explore and see if it's right for you. Now, since returning to cannabis about 20 years ago, you know, because I went through, like I said, a period where I couldn't smoke as a social worker because they were testing my pee, and I just didn't want to go through all that stress of potentially, you know, running into any issues. So I was really diligent and good with that. You know, but in these last couple of decades, since returning to the plant, I have not purchased, I'm not kidding you, even one bottle of Tylenol, Advil, aspirin, or anything like that. And that's something that most people keep in their cabinets as a regular. I probably will buy some aspirin because it's a good thing for like first aid just in case, but I haven't needed to use aspirin for so long. And I cook and stand on my feet. My feet are aching and my shoulders kill at the end of the day. I can't explain how I wake up every day refreshed, renewed, and ready to do it again with nothing damaged. Cannabis has definitely been a great friend to me. I don't buy sleep aids. I haven't purchased nausea medication, and the list goes on since I returned to cannabis. I have not used my endometriosis medication. That's the big thing. Oh my gosh, it used to tear up my stomach. Really expensive inflammatories that I took once a month during the heaviest days of my period. That's over now. I'm like in menopause, but during those days when they were really tough, ganja was such a lifesaver. I can't even believe it. No more medications for me. And that's just my story. Now, I've had asthma since I was 7 years old, and I was reliant on inhalers. But since returning to ganja, I can't even tell you, like, I've maybe filled 5 prescriptions in the last 20 years. And this is something that I'd have to have every few weeks. No, every couple of weeks, I need a new prescription. So, you know, I can attribute it to many things, but I know, you know, what's been working for me. Could it be the ganja? I'm definitely convinced that it is. So in any case, that's pretty much it for my talk today. You know, I just want to tell you a bit about my story, tell you about the things that it could potentially do for you and your family and those who you know around you. I've seen so many lives changed and improved because of this beautiful, wonderful plant. And like I said, it's not for everybody. You know, some people do have a reaction to it, but I do believe that there's a way that you could still benefit in some way, shape, or form. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. I really appreciate you having me here. I'm going to hang around for a bit for some questions. But in the words of the infamous Mr. Robert Nesta Marley, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me while I light my spliff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reena. Thank you. God bless. Thank you so much. So the floor is now open to questions for you.
Everyone will have to unmute. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. I really appreciate this. And this is the week.
Reena, I'll just start, and I want to remind everybody that we did mute you during the meeting, except for Mary Lorimer. I didn't mute you, Mary, because I know you don't know how to unmute yourself. But if anybody wants to speak, they'll just have to unmute themselves. I scribbled down a few things while you were talking. When you gave the list of celebrities who are on the bandwagon, you forgot the band leader, our own very own Snoop.
Oh, I've been a little bit upset at him at how he's been treating women lately. So I kind of
okay. And I always remember him because I have a picture of him on my fridge. So
if you're ever bored, you should Google some of the little videos that Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg have put together, cooking together. They're actually really, really comical. And I love that the cultures have really come together that way. They're from two entirely different, genres and, groups and, target audiences. And they've really, really, brought a lot of people together and a lot of audiences together, which I think is just so wonderful. Like, who would have thought 20 years ago, Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg? I know. Thought you were crazy, but
the original odd couple.
The original odd couple.
The other thing I was going to mention was my son manages a grocery store out in Newfoundland, and they put the cannabis store on his store, so it's attached there. And when they had their grand opening, and I said to him, like, what kind of people were coming in to do that, and he said, honestly, people just like you.
Yeah.
He said all the women that are over 50 are all coming in and buying the creams and buying the gummies and all that sort of stuff. So I thought it was kind of funny. He said the place is packed with people just like you, Mom.
I love that. I wish they would do that in Ontario. I keep saying food and ganja have a symbiotic relationship. They really are one and of the same things. They share terpene profiles. They share so many different components. I didn't even mention that in the talk, but they do belong together. They absolutely do. And hearing that the target audience that he's serving the most, that's great. I've had the same experience. The majority of people who have been asking me in the last 5 years, questions, comments, wanting to know more, wanting to sample, are all women over 50, over 55, now in the stage where they're looking at taking back control of their health, where they're recognizing maybe things don't work as well, or they're more open to, other alternative forms of treating themselves. And it's therapeutic, it's healing, it's, just so much more. So thank you so much for that comment, Lee. That's so great to hear.
I'll just say one more thing, because tomorrow is 4/20, and my daughter just sent me a coupon for 20% off at Honey Pot, because most of the shops are giving 20% off tomorrow.
That's so cute. You have the best kids.
Thank you. We have a question from Jay.
Oh, Jay. Hi, Jay. It's so great.
Hi, hello, my sister. How are you, my sister? How are you?
Great.
I love you. I miss you.
I miss you too.
I miss you too. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple questions, not hard questions by any means, Reena. You already know that I'm a healthcare worker as a nurse, right? Absolutely. So as a nurse, we promote like hydromorph or hydromorphine. I love the fact that you're smoking. Like we promote drugs. And one of the things I want to do is talk to our doctors to talk about cannabis,
Yeah.
because I work in a sector that is long-term care. We're not doing nothing for our long-term care residents, like in terms of, rehabilitation. When you go into long-term care, the next step of your journey of your life ultimately goes to you're going to die,
Yeah.
right? You're coming into long-term care
Yes.
to die. That's the truth. Okay. It doesn't matter what you want to say or what you want to do. You come to long-term care, you die. I've been doing this for like I'm coming into retirement in long-term care. But what the question is, how do we get doctors to talk about cannabis?
Yeah.
How do we have that conversation to say, instead of doing hydromorph or some other like opioids, how do we do cannabis, or without the THC? Maybe they need the THC, but how do we have that conversation with these facilities across Ontario or across the country about promoting cannabis? Because
Yeah.
I'm pro cannabis, absolutely. But and I'll ask another question after that. What do you think? How do
Yeah.
I approach that question?
That's an amazing question. So this is honestly something that a lot of people in the industry have been battling for many, many years. Thankfully, we do have a few doctors who have taken it upon themselves, not without much criticism. One of my really good friends, Dr. Ira Price, you can Google him, IRA Price. He had a couple of the first facilities here in Hamilton that used to offer cannabis advice and work in conjunction with family practitioners. He is a medical doctor, is now working in emergency. But the truth is, the honest truth of the matter is, we don't have a whole lot of doctors who are educated about this, and Health Canada has not been pushing it, which is a giant part of the problem. Quick super story. A long time ago, about 20-ish years ago, I lived in Windsor. When I was living in Windsor, Ontario, I went to my doctor down there and asked them for a medical card because I thought it would just be protecting me better. If I was ever smoking and I ever, ran into a situation with the police, this is my medicine. They can't bother me, and, so on and so forth. Back then, that was a problem. But this doctor had no idea about cannabis, and she became very insultive, and actually she called me a drug addict and told me that she was not going to service me any longer. Myself and my husband at the time was not going to service us if we didn't rehabilitate ourselves and stop that or whatever. And she said it so loud that the entire waiting room heard. So obviously I was very offended because I knew what I was talking about, and I was very aware that she was clueless. I contacted the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario almost immediately. And I wrote a very detailed letter about how I felt, and just, how honestly and truly disgusting how that situation was. And you know what? They had a giant apology. Not only did they apologize for my circumstance, they took it very seriously, and they gathered a team together that then traveled all the way down to Windsor, Ontario, to spend a week with that doctor and give her cannabis endocannabinoid system education. And then they consulted with me after the fact and asked me if I felt that was satisfactory, so on and so forth. It was great that they took it serious and they did that, but that just tells you that's honestly the situation that the majority of our doctors are in. And it's really that serious. It's for really the general public to put in complaints and to let Health Canada know we need to pick it back up. They were starting to develop an amazing medical program. They really were. And then legalization came, and I don't know, maybe just like too much effort or whatever. They decided, you know what, there's enough money coming from taxation of this that we don't really need to focus on, because it really comes down to dollars and cents, right? Let's be real. It just kind of got dropped. There's still a giant department in Health Canada that handles other aspects. We have a medical cannabis program for our veterans. We have it for cancer. We have it for multiple sclerosis and numerous other things. So the government recognizes the validity of the medical benefits and its power in healing, but has not put the time in yet to include it as part of our structural, health component, if you will, part of our health system. So what I would say to that is talk to your doctors if you find your doctors don't know very well. I had to school a doctor recently, and it's really sad. It was a young female doctor. You know, I was so happy to find a young female doctor, but when I went in there and found out she was just like so uninformed about so many things, I ended up leaving that doctor's office. You know, I really probably should have done more to push that she gain the education, but this is something that there are some people lobbying and advocating for, but there definitely needs to be more of a push, because I feel like a lot of people are slipping through the cracks. The story that you had, Jay, is not uncommon. I had a friend also who was, you know, terminally ill, and they asked for cannabis. They told the doctor team that cannabis helps them with their pain relief, but the medical team decided instead to override their request and prescribe them morphine, which
Yeah.
made them completely, you know, I mean, they were almost like comatose. They weren't able to do anything. They were sitting there like an invalid, you know, and it was such a stark difference from when people were bringing them a little bit of cannabis oil. You know, they were high, but they were able to have a conversation. They knew who they were. They knew who the people in the room were. They were able to get up and use the bathroom, eat food, you know, brush their hair, brush their teeth, do everything as normal. But when they were on morphine, they literally sat there like a zombie. And this is what the doctors were pushing. I couldn't believe it. It was so disheartening. Even fentanyl, like they even support fentanyl more than they support cannabis, which is absolutely incredible. So it's really for the general public to push, you know, to push our doctors as well, you know, let our doctors know that we're not happy that it's not part of, you know, their training program or part of, you know, CPSO's requirements, because it really should be CSPO, sorry, requirements.
Oh, thank you so much. The second question that I have is, so I'm going to wear this on my sleeve. Like, I'm being like very honest, Reena. But you already know my family. You already know, you know, we're sisters. Because I also have children that are mentally ill, who suffers through, you know, mental health and illness. And I have a kid that, you know, who's 16, who ran away from home. I know where she is. Does actually, okay. So I have my one kid who is going to be 15. I was told to go to, you know, one of the cannabis stores and get like cannabis, like CBD pills, right? And no THC, and that would help her, along with taking her own, like the medical, like her own drugs, and that would help her. But I didn't give it to her.
Okay.
I didn't give it to her because I don't know what the effects are, and of CBD, like CBD oil or CBD like pills, probably because I'm probably the same thing as a nurse. We always use our medical knowledge, right? So CBD or THC, like, it's not part of our training. It's not part of nursing. It's not part of that. But I think that there's a benefit to having CBD in when it comes to mental health. But because she's a young girl who's like, you know,
It's a
who's
concern,
14.
So a lot of
Yeah.
people have concerns with youth and cannabis for sure. So I'll tell you, like right off the bat, I was a social worker in Detroit and I worked in youth homes. I only worked with youth. And let me tell you, they had these kids on Ritalin, oh gosh, I don't even Zoloft, you know, so many different medications. And these kids were like, they literally were zombies. And I found that in some cases, their behavioral problems or mental concerns even became worse. There were many children or many youth who went off and would smoke cannabis with their friends, of course, on their own, without permission from the home or the staff or whatever. But let me tell you, when those kids would come home that evening, they were honestly so entirely different from the others. They were much more social. They were much more corrigible. They followed directions. They were helpful. Like just their overall outlook and their attitudes had really improved. I can't explain it. You know, I know that we really frown, or as a society, we frown upon cannabis use with youth, but we really have to look at other cultures and get past that, because, you know, this is what we view in North America as something that's wrong. But there are many countries and many, like I said, cultures that use this as something very normal, even in babies. THC, yeah, would make her high. CBD, now getting to CBD itself, there are actually very few things that CBD interacts with. So if you're concerned about it interacting with any medication, there's not much it will interact with. In terms of herself, it's not going to make her high at all, at all, at all, at all. She probably won't even notice she took it. But what will happen is that CBD is going to connect to this endocannabinoid receptors, excuse me, in her body. And wherever she needs a little bit of restoring balance, it will help. Whether it's hormones, you know, for moods, whether it's, you know, something physical, you know, it just has a way of helping to, like I said, restore homeostasis in a lot of areas of the body. So, you know, you can do the research there. There was a strain called Charlotte's Web that was created, and it was named after a young girl named Charlotte in California, who was only 8 years old, who had cancer. And this helped her to improve her quality of life, and it extended her life for a couple of years. Unfortunately, she was terminally ill. But if you ever look at the story of Charlotte, like, it will just bring you to tears. If you see this little girl pre and post cannabis, and also the results for a lot of children who experience seizures. It's really hard to watch some of the videos because you're watching them, like, you know, mid seizure. And you're seeing the parent, you know, kind of forcing a little bit of cannabis oil under their tongue. And you're like, oh my God. But within about a minute, you see, like, the seizures cease, literally. And all of a sudden the child's able to breathe and talk and look and be a kid again. So, you know, it's really just society that's made us so afraid of, you know, introducing cannabis to youth. And of course, there's also, you know, people have talked about the chicken and the egg thing, the mental health thing, which I don't believe it causes mental issues. From my research, there is a little bit of a causational relationship. So if you have predisposition in your family for some things, you know, THC could potentially aggravate that. But more research has also shown that there are strains that counteract that as well, and where people don't get that reaction. So just getting back to your question, with your 15-year-old, you know, I'm not a medical doctor by any means, but I would say I know many people who have been using cannabis for their youth, and I've seen nothing but tremendous results. I have a friend whose son was suicidal. He was suicidal at 16, and, you know, they really didn't know where to go. And she started giving him a little bit of cannabis, you know, a little bit of a quarter of a brownie edible here and there. And has it ever changed his life? He can't believe it. He described it to me as, when he has a bit of that brownie, things in his world just connect and he feels whole. And this is coming from someone who I consider to be a child, told me that. That almost brought me to tears. And, you know, I supply them with edibles and brownies, you know, just from my heart, because it's just such a wonderful story. But I know of many youth whose lives have changed. I know of many people whose children wouldn't be able to make it through school without CBD. Most especially for autism. You've got to take a look at what it's been doing for autistic kids, especially. But tremendous benefits. You know, do a little bit of research. You know, there are reputable websites out there that will give you good information. But, you know, like, really and truly, you don't have much to lose. It's not going to interact with her. CBD does not kill. Cannabis doesn't kill. You know, at the very most, maybe she'll feel sleepy, but there's no THC in it, so she probably won't. She's probably just going to feel a little bit more in her own skin, a little bit more relaxed. She might not even realize it's the CBD that's doing it. She might just start feeling better and not know where it came from.
Right, right. So, okay, so
Liz,
I will take this offline with you, my sister, and we'll have a different conversation on our page.
For sure. And I just want to put a quick plug in. By the way, ladies, I do really large scale cannabis events. And this Saturday, Saturday, April the 22nd, I'm having an event called Cannacrawl. So if you're interested in finding out more information about cannabis, if you want to explore some products, maybe samples, you know, speak to some of the producers of different products, I'm going to have about 30 plus vendors, as well as panel discussions, performers, you name it. But it's all people who are passionate and very, very knowledgeable about the cannabis plant. They will all be in one place this Saturday, April the 22nd, at ACCA, the African Canadian and Caribbean Association, at 754 Barton Street. And that event will take place from 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. this Saturday. So feel free to join us. Come on through, you know, test some samples, talk to some really interesting people. I doubt that you will leave there without meeting at least one new person that you want to stay in contact with.
Louise, I have to go just very quickly. You quoted some studies. Is there any way you could give your information to Louise, and then she can share that with you when you quoted the studies and so on? It would save me looking it up. And I apologize, Louise. I've got back to back Zoom meetings, but I congratulate you, Louise, for the amazing speakers. We're so lucky to have you in our lives. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jan. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Susan. Susan has been waiting patiently. Susan?
Hi.
Hi, Susan.
I'm probably one of those people who is a skeptic. And there were no sort of statistics about how many people don't use cannabis as opposed to do. And you know, I think there are a lot more than we might realize that don't, because I really don't feel the need for it. And I feel the one thing you mentioned about giving it to babies is that's a horrific thought to me, in some cultures I know. And but I just don't feel. I feel if I'm angry at somebody or whatever, it's good to expound that rather than to take something to hold it back. And so I just don't know, like, and I guess my basic thought is, with people who go in to buy cannabis, where does it, how many of those statistically, or how many of those people really don't need it, but that are taking it just because it might be the thing to do, or they want to feel higher or whatever. And that's the part that really bothers me, because there are so many cannabis stores around now. You can go to the corner and get it. And with youth particularly, I'm thinking about, because older people like me have thought about it a bit more maybe, but it's the youth that I'm concerned about. How many are going to be taking it that really don't need it? So I mean, I'm really a skeptic as to whether how good it is. You said that it contributes towards many sicknesses, but there are no statistics. So you know, I'm sort of on the fence. I really don't think that it's for a lot of people. And you know, I love my life as it is, you know.
Yeah, and that's great. You know, as I mentioned, it's definitely not for everybody. So you mentioned a few things there in terms of stats, users and non-users. We're still, like, there's so much growth that can happen in this industry. We still have only about 50% of our population in Canada are actual cannabis users. So you're still looking at about half of our population that does not use, and that's the reality. Mind you, of that 50%, there are a lot of people that are interested, curious, and trying to explore. Why would someone want to do that? Well, I personally would say, you know, when looking at babies, the baby, you know, comment there, we actually used to use it for babies here in Canada. You know, just over 100 years ago, it was part of our regular pharmacopoeia. They used to use it for numerous conditions for babies. You know, and that's not something that you have to take my word for. You can find that evidence. It was a campaign based on a lot of false truths, actually, that made it no longer legal. But again, it's not something that everybody has to use. In terms of youth, you know, as someone who, like I said, I worked in some of the worst neighborhoods in North America, and I worked primarily with youth, and youth, at-risk youth specifically, those who end up in the system and so on and so forth. You know, I've seen a lot of kids get drunk, and I've seen kids die from blood alcohol poisoning, which is much more available than cannabis. If there's a choice, I would prefer that our youth don't partake in anything and they focus on school. But the reality is they're out there, they're experimenting. And if it's not for medical purposes, they're experimenting to escape their lives or whatever. I would definitely advocate more so for cannabis over alcohol or anything else any day. But also remember that our stores are age gated. So you have to be 19 and over to enter and purchase. And they're very stringent on that. There's no, like back in the day when kids would hang out around the liquor store and ask an adult to go in and buy liquor for them. That's not really happening with the cannabis stores because, things are it's very rigid. The system was made very rigid. So
Yeah, but anyone can go in.
Anyone
if you're out 19, anyone of that age could go in.
19 plus.
Yeah. So yeah. It's a matter of choosing to go in and without, I wonder how many deterrents are there or things that say, these are the advantages and these are not the advantages or that sort of thing. Is that in the stores?
It's not in the stores, but Health Canada certainly has put a lot of money into cannabis education. The problem with it is, believe it or not, some of it has not been completely accurate. So that's definitely something that needs to happen. As someone who, again, going back to my social work days, I look at this society where we have alcohol available literally everywhere. We now have it even available at Pizza. You can go and order a pizza and you can have a beer with your pizza. Alcohol is very damaging. It is the #1 killer. It creates heart disease. It's, the biggest cause of stroke. Cancer. We finally acknowledge that alcohol causes cancer. It's a carcinogen. We're drinking carcinogens. There's no, great way of looking at it. Back when they were saying 1 glass a day was good, they've now retracted all of that. If you look at the breast cancer awareness website and you look at what their suggestions are for reducing your risks of ever developing breast cancer, the #1 suggestion is avoid alcohol.
So then at your panel on Saturday, will there be some sort of a balance between this is cannabis and not taking cannabis, or is it all take it?
Well, this event is for cannabis connoisseurs and those who love cannabis. It's not a health expo or anything for us to battle, whether it's good or whether it's not, because everyone who's coming there generally is someone who's very versed and aware and coming to celebrate and find.
So it's all pro. It
pretty much is. Yeah, it pretty much is. Me personally, I don't see many cons. I don't. If you look at whether or not people have to use it, they definitely don't have to. If you're someone who can be a happy person without anything, absolutely exercise, whatever, but don't turn to alcohol and say that that's a better choice. If someone drinks alcohol and they condemn cannabis, I really have to wonder if you're doing your research, because there's so much out there that tells you there's no comparison.
Alcohol in moderation is
not a
beneficial, beneficial, I guess.
It's like you would not say a good thing anymore. No, new research.
A glass of wine a week, 2 a week. They say you can have up to 3 a week.
It's a carcinogen.
It's a carcinogen, Susan.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's not good for you.
I just heard that.
No, they changed their minds and said there should be a warning symbol that says it causes cancer.
Yeah. It's
1 a week.
That. Yeah.
None.
Oh, Lee, what are we gonna do?
Well, I'm going to ignore it, and I'm rubbing cannabis cream on my thumb.
I was at a breast cancer fundraiser, and there was so much alcohol there, and there were a bunch of breast cancer survivors, and a few of them were, alcohol was free and whatever, but somebody actually did say, as much as we're enjoying and partaking in all of this, let's remember that for some of us, this is what caused where we are right now, right? Someone actually said that.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that it's half of the population as opposed to 80 or 90%. And that, I mean, that's good that there are a lot of people that aren't into any drugs of that. I think medically it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, but
yeah, and if you don't need it, like if you don't need it, you don't need it. But you know, like I said, I've had people come to me who would never put it near their mouth. They hated it their whole life, but they heard about the benefits for their inflammation. They heard about the benefits for their, you know, sclerosis and different things. I had a friend with sciatica, really bad sciatica, and he came to me and I gave him some of a cream that I make. And he couldn't believe that it literally worked for him instantly. Like he's gone through a barrage of medications that have made him ill and given him other things. And this is a guy who no support for cannabis, still wanted it illegal up until I gave him that cream. He tried it. He's like, am I going to get high from it? He was so upset even touching it, but he tried it. His wife made him try it and it changed his life. So, you know, that's not everybody for sure, but I believe that there are a lot of people who are not aware that there are benefits for them that they don't have. Like it's a plant. It's a plant that grows outside. I don't know why it's so demonized. Is
it stronger or less strong than cat? Is it stronger or less
than
cat?
Cats?
Yeah. You know, cat that comes usually imported from somewhere, and it's supposed to be a drug. Have you not heard of cat?
No, I haven't heard of cat.
I've heard of cat. How come you
I
haven't?
apologize. I have not heard of cat. But cannabis is not like I wouldn't classify it as a drug in the same sense because it's completely natural. It's not chemically composed. It was not created in a kitchen. It doesn't have chemicals that could force you to OD or interact with your other medications. It's literally a plant that's plucked from the ground. It's dried and it's smoked, just like catnip, just like people used to smoke the thing that goes in coffee. Oh my gosh, the purple flower. I forgot. Chamomile and you know some of the other things. You can smoke those as well. You can actually smoke red clover is supposed to be good for asthma. It's just another plant with you know lots of components. But again, you know it's if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. You know, it's just sometimes I you definitely don't have to. But I always ask people to question why. If you know if you're really strongly against it, I ask you to question why it is. Is it society that made you that way? Was it a situation or circumstance? Why are we more open to medications that are prescribed by doctors that come with a whole long list of side effects that may or may not be effective, but we're not open to something that Mother Nature has put right in our path? That's something that I always question.
It's a matter of what you need for your body. For me, like I have Tylenol sometimes, but that's about it. And then pills that are prescribed by the doctor, which is different, of course.
Yeah, I haven't bought Tylenol in a long time. But you know, everyone's different, of course. Everyone is different, and you can't, you know, make the same assumptions for everyone. But yeah, I'm very much you know, on the side of I believe that there could be benefits for everyone in some way, shape, or form. I really do.
Wonderful. Are there any more questions?
Marilyn had a question earlier.
Oh, go ahead, Marilyn.
I just was curious about your supper name. Do you cook actually with cannabis or?
I do. Yeah, I do. And I make it optional because sometimes guests don't want to partake in consuming cannabis, but the majority of people come to my dinners specifically for that, you know, because they want to learn how to medicate. And I do teach people how to do that at home as well, for their own healing. So yes, you know, often what I'll do is I'll prepare a menu, but I'll infuse the sauces on the side so that people can still have their meal. And if they decide they want to, you know, experiment a little bit or what have you. And I also follow the guidelines with the OCS, the Ontario Cannabis Stores, where I stay, you know, within certain limits so that, you know, especially I have a lot of newcomers that come to my dinners that, you know, want to try it out. So I make sure that it's an experience that they have full control over and that, you know, it would never be a situation where people would leave in a way where they felt uncomfortable or like they've gone beyond their limits or means.
So there isn't any restaurant. It's just you having dinner parties.
No restaurants yet. There's actually, I'm one of many chefs actually in the world. I'm one of the first ones, but now I'm joined by thousands. You know, there are all kinds of supper clubs that have popped up everywhere, and some of the top chefs in North America have jumped on board and are doing these cannabis dinners. So yeah, you know, it's just a way to normalize it and show people that, you know, you can self-medicate, or you can just enjoy being out. You know, alcohol is allowed to be paired with food, and people can go and sit in any given restaurant in the city or country and have your food and have that to complement it. Cannabis users want to have something similar too. They want to be able to enjoy their smoke, or, you know, something along with their food, because as I mentioned, they really are one and of the same thing. If you've ever tried ganja leaves, just so you know, leaves on the cannabis plant, here's a fun fact. It's the most nutrient dense green there is. I'm not kidding. It's the most nutrient dense green. And it does not get you high eating it raw. You have to burn it to convert it to, you know, remove the thing that makes you high. So if you were to eat fresh cannabis leaves, like, people have experienced a lot of healing in that. A lot of cancer patients make smoothies out of fresh cannabis leaves. You just get all of the antioxidants and all of the green goodness without any of the high.
Great, thank you. Wilhelmina.
Yes, I had to turn to cannabis oil because I'm allergic to all the pills that the doctors have.
Yeah.
So
and that's
I'm
what happens
finding
to a
that
lot of
it's so
people.
much easier.
Yeah.
And I'm not in as much pain as I used to be.
Yeah. And
Which-
and do you feel any improvements on, like, your moods as well? Like, as well as physical? Do you feel any mental change as well?
Oh, I'm just always the same, I guess. I
Oh,
don't know.
okay. Good for you. I find it makes me really happy. You know,
Well,
it
I'm always happy.
that's excellent. You know, it just for me, it just has a way of evening out a few things. So that's really great to hear. And yes, and this is what has a lot of people turning to cannabis, is that their regular health routines are no longer working for them, and what's being prescribed is not as effective, and people are finding they don't want to take 10 and 12 and 14 pills a day to get through their day. You know, for a lot of people, simple cannabis oil has replaced their entire healthcare regimen, and they're okay. Wilhelmina looks amazing.
Well, I ended up in the hospital because I didn't know I was allergic to the pills, to the anti-inflammatories. And then when I ended up in the hospital, and then they said, you can't take any more of that. And it was just like, okay, now what am I going to do?
Right.
Because I can't get knee replacements because I've got a metal allergy. And I was suffering, and then my son gave me these 2 bottles of tincture.
Yeah.
And I was taking it under my tongue, but I really didn't care that much for it. And then one day, pain was so desperate, I just took the drops and I put it on my hands, and then I rubbed it on both my knees. And I was really shocked that the pain was gone within 5 minutes.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, it's I know I keep saying it and I maybe sound redundant, or, you know, maybe as, you know, one of those cannabis supporters, but the miracle was real for me.
Yeah.
My endometriosis, those heavy inflammatory pills that I used to take didn't even take away the pain fully. They were not even fully effective. But what they did is they made me nauseous, they tore up my stomach and created a host of things. I was in disbelief myself that cannabis was healing me. I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe it. There's no way that it could have been that effective in such a short period of time. I had to test it, and it really did work. You know, you really don't know unless you try. And it's really unfortunate that, you know, we've been taught to hold it at arm's length as something that is dangerous, that is something that could cause us harm, you know, that we are a criminal if we partake in it, or that it's only associated with, you know, the lowest of the low people. And that's really how it's been painted to us. So, that's why, when folks, not everybody loves it, and that's fine, but you do have to question where that comes from. You got to question it. Is it because you've tried it and it didn't work, or because you've seen it create some really horrible things? Is that the case really? Or is it because somebody else convinced you and told you that and you believed it, because that's what we've been fed for a very, very long time? We're just starting to undo that. Just starting to undo that. So good on you, Wilhelmina.
All right, thank you so much.
Oh, and sorry, I see a question here in the group. I just want to say, for anyone who comes out to my event this Saturday, I will have on the guest list members of the Women's Canadian Club come in for free. Tickets are $10, but you get to come in for free. If you want to just come and check it out, if you want to see what it's all about, if you want to speak to some, experts, or, some local craft growers or producers, and you'll be amazed. There are people of all walks of life, and a lot of them are really young. There are a lot of young people starting out in the industry, who know their stuff. You'll be really amazed by their, band of knowledge, if you will. But yeah, so free for Women's Club, Canadian Club.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So those interested, let me know, and I'll put the list together of names and send it to her. So upon arrival, you will be welcome. So Renee, thank you for your time, and your presentation was in depth and very, very, very much informative. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. Thank you on the behalf of the Women's Canadian Club of Hamilton.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our next scheduled presentation is May 17th via Zoom, and we'll have Dr. Cheryl Green, PhD. She's with the St. Joseph Healthcare Foundation. So that's May 17th via Zoom. So we encourage everyone to register via our website or email us, and we will send you the link prior to the May 17th. Thanks for everyone being here today. Just a reminder to one and all that the call for nominations of the Women of Spirit Award is on. And it can be found via our website. We have postcards which will be used for distribution. So anyone who needs a few to have in the bags, or wherever they go, as I would call the low-hanging fruits, doctor's office, where they shop, to post it up, please connect with me so that you can receive it. My next event that will be attending is the May 1st event at Gage Park. Thank you all for being here, and peace, love, harmony. Have a terrific Wednesday. If you have your note from your doctor to get your spliff, go right ahead. I don't have a medical note
yet. You don't need one anymore.